Hello everyone, I'm Kevin from MRU Studios, and today I'm bringing another tutorial related to some questions I had from viewers of our new visual novel series, specifically the first episode that has been released to our channel. If you haven't had a chance or opportunity to check that out, please consider doing so. The link is in the card in the corner and also in the description. It's a fun, animated adventure visual novel I created. Lots of fun, humor, action, and I'm going to continue that, improve it as time goes on. It's a way to showcase and demonstrate my 3D animation techniques and also bring some fun humor to the lives of others who watch. So with that, I had some questions related to how I did some animation towards the end of that episode. And you'll see flip-flops on the feet of our amazing squad pilot here, Lara. This is related to a scene where she's walking into a hot tub to enjoy some nice relaxing downtime for the evening. And I created some animation where she's kicking the flip-flops off as she's headed in the walk cycle towards the hot tub. Now, this is custom animation I created, so it involves a somewhat manual process. So if you know of a better technique, hey, please feel free to share with me. I don't pretend to be an expert on this stuff yet. I know a lot of stuff, and hey, I'm always willing to improve my knowledge and skills. There's always a need for that. It's a constant learning, and I'm excited to continue to do so. I hope the information you find in this tutorial is useful for you. So with that, Lara, please say hello to our viewing audience. Let's get started. All right, so here we are in DAZ Studio in a blank, empty scene. And before we get started, let me show you what version of DAZ Studio I'm using, just in case you're interested and you're viewing this at a later date. So here, under Help, About DAZ Studio, I'm using, at the time, the latest 4.16.0.3. So if you want to follow along and try some of this stuff out, that's the version I'm using. So the first thing we need to do is get out of surface selection mode. I'm going to use the pointer here. Not that it matters right now, but it will once I get into doing some of the things you're about to see. So I have some smart content, and what I'm using is Genesis 2 Starter Essentials. Now, these Starter Essentials come, I believe they come pre-installed with DAZ Studio. It's been a long time, at least a year and a half, or maybe a year since I installed DAZ Studio. But I think these things come with DAZ Studio. If not, they're available on the DAZ 3D store. So we're going to go to Genesis 2 Starter Essentials, and we're going to come down to Wardrobe, and we're going to select Footwear. So we're going to select the Surf's Up Flip-Flop Props. I'm going to choose that, double click it, and it's going to bring the flip-flops in. Now, these are rigged props. They are rigged with basically the a bone structure from the pelvis down to the feet of the flip-flops. The reason for that is so that when you attach these to a character, the rigging of the flip-flops connects up with the rigging of the character. So the flip-flops move with the feet of the character, and which is what you want. But in this particular case, we are going to create some unrigged props for what we're about to show you. And you'll see in the next step why I'm doing this. We do use a rigged version of these, and you'll see that in the next steps also. Let me show you what movement looks like for each of these. So if I go to the left foot and I bend and move this around, there's kind of a limited degree of movement in how the flip-flops move around. And the amount of movement is going to be related to the rigging and connection of the bone structure to the other flip-flops. So if I move the thigh out a certain amount, I'm only going to be able to move it out a certain degree, okay, here, away from the other flip-flop. So it's going to kind of make it more difficult to kind of have these flip-flops move freely when they're bouncing around off the character's feet. To correct that, or to have it so we don't have to deal with the rigging in this case, what we can do is change these rigged flip-flops to unrigged. So how we do that is select the flip-flop here, and we're going to go over here to edit, come down to figure, and go to rigging and say convert figure to prop. Now, this is a figure because part of a figure's bone structure is applied to this prop. So it is technically a figure because of that. Now you could go to object and go down to rigging, but there is nothing here to actually convert to a prop. You convert prop to figure, which is not what you want to do. So you come over here to figure, come down and go to rigging and select convert figure to prop. Now, basically all the rigging is eliminated. So the bone structure, everything is gone, but we have both of the flip-flops together. So now if we try to remove them or rotate them, they're not going to move or rotate independently, which is not what we want. So to correct that, what I need to do is come over here and change to our geometry editor tool. Kind of looks like a grid, partial grid with a pencil. Click that, left click it, and we're going to start with the right flip-flop first. So what we want to do is eliminate our left flip-flop. We're going to create just a single prop of the right flip-flop. Right click and go to geometry select mode. In this case, I like marquee selection because I'm basically going to push and hold the left mouse button to draw a box around the geometry I want to modify, in this case, delete. So you see all of the geometry faces, or in this case, the polygons, are selected. So what we're going to do is right click, go to geometry editing, and we're going to say delete selected polygons. All the polygons we have selected. Left click that, and it says you're about to delete that many polygons, and we're going to say yes. Now it's important to note that DAZ Studio in its current form does not have an undo, so if you delete geometry, it can be very dangerous, so make sure this is what you want to do, because if I go and do Control-Z, there's no getting back those polygons you deleted. It's not like Blender where it does have that capability. So hopefully in the new DAZ Studio 5.0 they're working on, they update that so you can undo. So now we just have the right flip-flop, which is perfect. And we want to create an individual prop asset for this. What we're going to do is come to File, go to Save As, go all the way down to Support Asset, which you see over here, and we are going to go to Figure Prop Asset, which you see right there selected. Click that, and it will ask you what do you want to name this new prop. So we're going to say, we're going to call it Flip Flop, and this is the right flip flop, right? Cool. All right. All right. So we have the right flip flop. We click Save. Now it's going to ask you what do you want to name the product. A lot of this is for if you want to make the new asset available on like DAZ 3D's store. It doesn't matter. You can name this whatever you want to. Just make sure the asset directory is where you want this new prop asset to go. And it is because I selected it. Click Accept. All right, so now we're going to go and see where we place that flip-flop. It's in my content library, and this is the way I've organized it. You can create new folders however you want. Just right-click and select Create Subfolder. So you can basically organize this however you like. And I have placed the asset I just created under the character I'm using, Lara. So you see the prop here. Now, I've already done this previously, so that's why you see these two props here. But what we're going to do is show you how to create a custom thumbnail for this prop, because it doesn't look that good. It's kind of hard to see. And you'll notice because we did select prop, it has a little green area here with the text prop. Depends on how you save things as to how that label comes up. What we'll do is come over to our render settings, and we're going to render a nice thumbnail using NVIDIA, the NVIDIA iRay. So we select General, and we come over here and go to Square 1 by 1, and we're going to set this to 91 pixels by 91 pixels, which is the default number of pixels set for a thumbnail in your library. Let's come over here, we'll zoom in a little bit, and that looks pretty good. What we'll do is go to the location where we saved that prop, which is going to be right here. It looks like it's already set properly. And this is what it looks like in the folder. By default, DAZ Studio creates the DUF file, which is your scene or asset, and you've got a thumbnail here. What we want to do is replace that thumbnail with the one we're about to create. And we'll just call it flip-flop. It's going to get renamed here. New window, that's fine. We'll see it come up as it renders. It's going to render very fast. So then say render. Okay, that's the thumbnail that's created. It's going to go in that folder location, and we click save. Now, when we come over to our folder path here, we see that it creates a nice looking flip-flop. So we want to replace our old flip-flop thumbnail with the new one. So I copy the name, delete that, and I apply the name to the thumbnail image we want to use, because that's this specific name, the name of your DUF file, .duf.png, is what DAZ Studio uses as the thumbnail. So now if we go back to DAZ Studio and we come into our content library under assets, we'll see it still has the old thumbnail there. We have to refresh, right click, refresh, and now we got a nice cool thumbnail. And this is going to be the unrigged prop for the right foot. And we just literally do the same thing for the left foot. We delete the flip-flop prop, okay, because we've got it saved now. We don't need it in there. And come back out, move the rigged props back in, or just double click them. Okay, they'll come back in. We're still here in Geometry Editor. We want to go and say, convert the flip-flops under figure, rigging, convert figure to prop. Okay, that's the first step. We go back, select the prop, and we're going to select this time the right flip-flop. Make sure we're selection mode, marquee selection. Make sure Geometry Editor is selected up here as well. Highlight that or select it. Looks like all the geometry for the right flip-flop. Right click, go editing, and then say delete selected polygons. It says that's how many you're deleting. Say yes. Now we just have the left flip-flop. We want to save this the same way we did with the right one. File, come down to save as, support asset, figure prop asset. It's going to go in the same folder, and we are just going to place it under, call it flip-flop left. Okay. Save. It's going to go in there. Everything is fine. Our asset directory is fine, except content library. Now we have that with the thumbnail we need to correct here. So let's get the perspective view in position. And we're going to do the same thing for the left flip-flop, sorry. Keep getting those confused. Okay, sorry about that. So we're going to zoom in, come down, and we will make a thumbnail for that. So let's go to render settings, and we're going to go, everything should be fine, and we're just going to leave the name flip-flop because we're going to change it anyway, and we're going to say render that. There it is. Click save. And it comes over here as flip-flop. We want to replace the left flip-flop thumbnail. So we're going to copy the name, delete the old thumbnail, and apply the name to the thumbnail we want to use. Hit enter, and come back over to DAZ Studio, go under Content Library, that's the prop right there, right-click, refresh. Now we have a nice looking two separate flip-flop props. In the next part, we're going to show you how we use these to create animated flip-flops flying off of Lara's feet. Let's go do that. All right, before we actually get into DAZ Studio, I want to show you the animation I'm talking about. That this is the exact scene from the episode toward the end of the visual novel. You'll see her dropping the coat here. I do have a tutorial that shows you how to create that animation. The link is in the description. It's called How to Using D-Force in Animation. So what we're focusing on is the flip-flop she's wearing. You'll see them fly off of her feet. Let me go ahead and show you what that looks like. All right, so here we are in DAZ Studio. This is the scene I'm talking about where we created the animation for the flip-flops flying off of Lara's feet. I want to show you how we got those flip-flops on Lara's feet. So for right now, we'll just hide them, okay? And there's one cool feature I'd like to show you before we do that, is if you've got a character selected here, okay, and you want to hide the character and everything parented, you normally, if you just click the character here, you go on the main character and you click the eye icon to hide, it's just going to hide the character and not the props and things attached. So to hide everything at the same time, before you click the eye icon, press and hold Control and then click the eye icon, and that hides everything at the same time. It's a wonderful hidden secret I found out about that I learned from someone that I've met through my three-dimensional animation journey his name is WP Guru. I highly suggest you check him out. Really cool, does a lot of stuff, Blender, Substance Painter, he does DAZ Studio, and just a really cool guy. So check him out, like his videos, and subscribe as well. So let's bring Lara back in. So let's zoom in there. And we're going to go to the rigged smart content here and go to Genesis 2 Starter Essentials. Just click on that, double click, come down to wardrobe, and we're going to go to footwear. And here they are. Let's hide the flip-flops we have on her right now because I want to show you how we add these. So I select Lara here, the character, double click them, and it's going to say, I don't know what these flip-flops are for. So they're going on a Genesis. She's a Genesis 8 female. And the way I got them to look right is selecting Genesis 2 male. Under what type of item it is, you don't have to worry about it. Just select Genesis 2 male and click accept. And the algorithm for AutoFit does a good job of putting them on there. So now that we've shown that, I'm going to delete those flip-flops because they're already on there. Let's bring the ones back in we have on her feet. Let me bring up the timeline. Now you'll see here I started at frame 15, and that was because, as you saw, the code is hanging from her hand. That animation, I had to run the D-force over a certain number of frames to have it hang from her hand. Now, I probably could have done it on place, but I've actually noticed that if you do it over a certain number of frames, it seems to work a little bit better. That's just my observation. You can do it however you want to. But so we're starting at frame 15, and we come over here, and we see that, let's actually bring this down because I want to show you some things. So what I did was, you'll see the flip-flops kind of floating in air. There's a reason for that. And that reason is when we move to the frame, in this case it's frame 41, her left foot is going to line up with that flip-flop that's hovering in the air. There's a reason behind that. If you zoom in, you'll see that that flip-flop pretty closely lines up with the one that's on her foot. It's not exact, but things happen so fast that you're really not going to notice that transition. It looks natural. And I want to preface what I'm saying here is that I realize that the animation I'm creating is not physically accurate. It doesn't look accurate to what you'd see in the real world, and that's okay because the visual novel is right now stylized. So I just wanted to create a cool effect, which is what we did. So how we get that flip-flop into that position, what it is let's move her back to frame 15 here where she's standing. All right. You see, they're already in the position they need to be in, but what I did is I took these unrigged flip-flops we created in the previous part of the tutorial here, and I just moved them into the scene. Now, one thing I want to point out, if you just double-click it, it's going to place the flip-flop at the origin, which isn't even in this room. What you can do is press Alt, click on the prop, and then drag it into the environment here. And you see this target, it shows you exactly where the flip-flop or the item is going to be placed. If we release both Alt and the mouse button, it places it where the target was. Just a nice feature. So we're going to do the same thing with the right flip-flop. press Alt, bring it in, click, hold it right there. Now, what I did was, this is the left flip-flop, and I moved it into the position where you see this flip-flop right here. Basically, it was a manual process. I just used the translation tools here, translated that around. I used rotation, so we can rotate this around in the X, Y, and Z direction to what you see here. We're going to do some Z rotate and Y rotate, and we just want to get that flip-flop into the position where you see this right here, okay? Now, that's not accurate to where it needs to be, but I just want to show you how to get that flip-flop into the position. We're going to hide that one. And what I want to do is demonstrate how this works. So if you drill down into the unrigged flip-flop here, what you're going to see, move the camera over so you can see what I'm talking about. But if you look down here, it's visible in render, and I have there's keyframes set on that. So if I move over to, that's under parameters here, we select that flip-flop, come down, it's in the parameters here, we scroll down until we get to this visible in render parameter. If we're looking at the flip-flop here, we clicked on it to turn that off at frame 0. And then at frame 41, where her foot is lining up with that unrigged flip-flop, we set the visible in render to on. We just clicked it, and that generated a keyframe. And if we go to the frame before, it's off. The frame there, it's on. And this only controls the visibility for NVIDIA iRay. So if we actually move over to iRay, we'll go here, you'll see that flip-flop doesn't appear. It doesn't appear until we move to frame 41. So if we come over here, it's not there. Now it is visible in that frame. So we're going to move over, and you'll see that indeed it's there. It doesn't quite line up to the one that's on her foot. So the other thing we need to do, in addition to making that flip-flop visible, is we need to literally at this point turn off the flip-flop that left flip-flop that's rigged on her foot. We're going to go to the character. All right, come down. Let's get out of iRay first. We're going to come down, and we're going to go to the surf's up flip-flops. And how we get rid or hide that is we come down and go to left thigh. We're going to go all the way down to the rigging, and we're going to go to left foot. If we click left foot, hit Control and the eye icon, it's going to make all parts of that flip-flop that's rigged on her foot disappear. Now, you do have the ability with these rigged props, you do have a setting under properties for display, and you do also have that visible in render. The problem with using this is because both of the flip-flops are rigged together, if we make visible in render, we turned it off here, then it's going to hide both flip-flops. So as soon as the left flip-flop disappears, the right one is too, and it's going to disappear before she's actually in the position for this flip-flop you see unrigged in the air. It's going to be before she kicks it off. So it's going to look very strange. Now, how I got the animation to work is if you look at the left flip-flop, I basically set some movement here under transforms. I did some translation and rotation. Okay. Don't worry about the scale. I didn't change the scale. That's just because of the way I set the keyframes. But if you're looking here and you go over to frame 40, literally what I did was as you move over, we get to that point and the flip-flop starts moving. What I did at frame 41 is I said, okay, we need to keyframe this. It's this key down here with a plus next to it. Click that, and that will set a keyframe on all transforms. So basically that sets the base of where the flip-flop is located. Then what we do is I just arbitrarily move to frame 51 here, okay? I move to frame 51. Now her flip-flop is going under the floor. Don't worry about that. I rendered each part of the scene separately, so the background was rendered differently from the character. I just basically rendered different parts and composited them together, which I can get into in another in another tutorial. For now, don't worry about it. So what we're going to do is when we get to frame 51, what we've said is that's where our left flip-flop is. So at frame 40, it's in the position where it's supposed to be, and then we just moved it over using a combination of translation and rotation manipulation here in the parameters. I literally just move these sliders back and forth like this, X, Y, and Z, until I got the flip-flop in the position where I wanted it, and then I rotated a little bit to make it look like it's flying off, physically flying off her feet. So you got Z rotation, Y rotation, and X rotation. Let me undo those because I just want to show you. I just wanted to demonstrate how that looks. So we had it move using a combination of translation and rotation up to there. Then I set a keyframe, and keyframes will automatically be set under most conditions if you just adjust these parameters, translation and rotation. If you move them, it automatically sets a keyframe. So then once I got it in that position over there, I moved it went to frame 60 and basically used a combination of translation, rotation, and moved the flip-flop to that position there. All right. Then I went to frame 65, did a combination of translation and rotation movement, placed it there, and then at frame 70, it's in its final position. All right. So literally, it's just moving it to where I think it looks good. It's not anything to do with D-Force or any other component of DAZ Studio. This is a very manual process. And you'll notice, and I didn't really manipulate this, and I'll probably go into this more in animation use in DAZ Studio. You also have a graph editor here. And if we select, let's say, translation here, we have the ability to click on a particular keyframe here, and we can select the TCB values. I won't go too much into that right here. The TCB values are over here. They're values you can enter to control the way DAZ Studio handles the TCB interpolation. That stands for tension, continuity, and bias. It's a mathematical concept related to vectors. We won't get into that here because I didn't have to modify any of those values to get the look I wanted. But in future episodes, I just wanted to comment to give you an idea of what I might be going into in future tutorials. So right now, we moved these, basically set these keyframes just by moving a combination of translation and rotation to get the flip-flops in the position where they're at. And then DAZ Studio's built-in interpolation handles the movement of the flip-flops between those keyframes that we set. And you'll see that right here. So if we play this, it's literally going to move between those keyframes, and DAZ Studio is completely handling the interpolation, like I said, between those keyframes. Now, what I want to point out is the flip-flop that's unrigged is sitting there in the air. That will automatically be hidden and shown, as I was saying before, based on the keyframe we had set up for our left flip-flop when we go under Display, Visible and Render, okay? And like I was saying, you go over here, you look in Visible and Render, all the keyframes before 41, when her foot lines up with the unrigged flip-flop floating there, its Visible and Render is off. When we move to 41, it suddenly turns the visible and render off. Now, what I had to do is I had to render frames 15 to frame 40 by coming in here and going to render settings. Under image series, what I did was I said start at frame 15, which is where she's beginning her walk cycle, and we moved to frame 40. So I took and I rendered that image series as PNGs into the directory I've selected, okay? So it's going to render basically however many frames there are between 15 and 40, it's going to render them out. Then what I did is I moved to frame 41. At frame 41, we already have, as I said, the unrigged prop set to automatically be made visible in render. When we get to, we're at 40, visible in render's off. We're at frame 41, visible in render is on. So in NVIDIA iRay, that prop, that unrigged prop is suddenly going to be turned on, okay? What we have to do is, starting at frame 41, manually hide that left flip-flop. So we go to the rigged prop here, and we go all the way down to where you see left foot. That left foot is the left flip-flop. We select that, click Control, and click the eye icon. So all parts of that flip-flop, the left foot, are hidden. Now, if we don't hit Control, it's only going to hide like the back of the flip-flop, and then you have to go and drill down to left metatarsals and also hide that as well. So the reason I did it at left foot and just said hit Control is because it hides all parts of that rigged flip-flop automatically. And then what we're going to do is render from frame 41, okay, to frame 60. Okay, and there's a reason that we go from frame 41 to frame 60. All right, and you'll see that here. So it's going to go flying off, really super cool. Okay, now we'll go to frame 60. Let's move over. And the reason I stopped at frame 60 is because at frame 61, her right foot is going to line up with that unrigged flip-flop we have set up. And we're going to do the same thing we did for the right foot that we did for the left. If you look down here, for that unrigged right flip-flop, you go to Display, under Rendering, you see we have a keyframe set. So at frame 0, we have the visibility for the right flip-flop turned off. When we get to frame 60, let's minimize the left one so it doesn't cause confusion. You click that keyframe here. Frame 60, we move from frame 60 to 61. You see visible and render over here turned to on. So we set a keyframe where the visible and render was made on, and it will be visible in NVIDIA iRay. Then we do the same thing. So now, as I said, we rendered frame 40 to frame 60. Then at frame 61, we are going to start a new render. So at frame 61, and I believe this is all the way to the end of the animation, which is to frame 159, we're going to set to have it render. So we go to the rigged right flip-flop that's on her foot. We come down to the right thigh and go down to right foot. And we will, at frame 61, we will click the eye, we'll click Control and the eye icon to hide all parts of that rigged flip-flop that's on her foot. See, the rigged flip-flops are still there. You just don't see them anymore. So then what I did is, if you go to that right flip-flop, I did the same thing I did with the left one. I created a series of keyframes that are automatically interpolated by DAZ Studio's built-in animation interpolation algorithm. So here you see a series of keyframes I had set for translation and rotation. And literally how I set these keyframes is I just went to that frame and I moved the flip-flop into the position where I wanted to. Like I said, it's important that you set a default. So go to transforms here and then click the plus right over here so that we create keyframes for the translation and rotation, because we need a base and we're going to move from that position. So if you come to the transforms again, we're going to advance to frame 70. And so we moved this right flip-flop into the positions it's at using a combination of translation and rotation, X, Y, and Z values, basically just moving them around to where we thought it would look good, where I thought it would look good, okay? And then that created keyframes. Move to frame 80 here, come over, and then I moved it using X, Y, Z, translation and rotation into that position. Move to frame 85, and that's where I kind of got the bounce. I said, okay, it comes from there, and it comes back up. So it's looking like it's bouncing off the floor. All right, and move to frame 90, did the same thing, and then frame 100, where the flip-flop finally rests. So all of these keyframes, and you'll see where I set the X, Y, and Z translation. I hope that's big enough for you to see. I probably should have zoomed in. I will in future episodes, but that's what I did. I set, basically just move the flip-flop to where I thought it would be at that frame, and let the DAZ Studio interpolator literally handle the rest. So if we come over here and look, we play, that flip-flop just bounces up. So that's totally just manually generated physics. Had nothing to do with any kind of special tool or anything like that, other than just moving things around. And you'll see now, since she's walked away, those flip-flops are still sitting there on her foot. They're just hidden. So if I click the right foot under the rigged flip-flops, you'll see the flip-flop is still there. The same thing with the go to left thigh, go to left foot, it's hidden. Click it, hold control, click the eye icon. The flip-flops are still there. They just don't appear. So I hope that made sense. I was trying to explain it the best I could. It's a very manual process. I wouldn't say that it's particularly difficult. It just takes, it's a little time consuming based on what I wanted to do. There may be a better way to do that. And if you know and you have experience in DAZ Studio, say, hey, why don't you just do this instead of doing that? Please let me know in the comments. I'm not saying that I'm an expert on doing this. I'm learning too. And I'm always willing to learn from viewers and others to help me just put some more tools in my toolbox to allow me to do some really cool stuff in the future. Now, in the future, I'm not going to be using DAZ Studio as much. I'm basically moving away from it to Blender. Now, I know there's a number of people that may watch this channel that do appreciate the DAZ content, so I still will continue making DAZ content. I can do a tutorial as well. Hey, let me know in the comments if you'd like to see this, but I could do a tutorial on animation to show you actually how to, in more in-depth, use animation in DAZ Studio. I will say I'm not terribly fond of that. I would, preferably, Blender is a better animation tool. Not knocking DAZ Studio. I'm not trying to say DAZ 3D is horrible or anything like that. There is just not as much you can do with the DAZ animation that you can do with Blender. Blender is much more robust for animation. There is some really bad bugs that I can get into that I happened to run into when I was doing the first episode of the visual novel that is very frustrating and in some cases caused a few days worth of lost work. And that has to do with keyframes disappearing and things like that. Like I said, I'll make another video to kind of talk about that some more. But I hope you liked the video. Hope it was helpful. I hope I explained this stuff well. I'm still working on getting my setup configured to do some tutorial videos. So like zooming in and zooming out, I got to get that figured out. Anyway, hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a like and consider subscribing to the channel. It's really helping me out. I'm really encouraged by what I'm seeing over the last few months in the tutorials I've created. Things have really done well. I'm getting new subscribers and those who appreciate what I'm doing. I really want to help people out as much as all of the creators who I've met through my 3D animation journey watching on YouTube, and I want to give back to the amazing community that's given so much to me and hopefully help you in your own artistic and creative journeys. So like I said, please consider subscribing, hit that bell notification, or hit the bell icon to get notifications when I put out new content and live streams. I'm going to try to put out regular tutorial videos every single Monday, and maybe put some live streams in there as well. So I hope you all have an amazing 2022. Wish the best for you, your families, and loved ones, and continuing our animation journeys. We'll see you in the next video.